Good morning, everybody. There's a whole list of questions here, and and also today I wanted to talk some more about forgiving ourselves and about apologizing, because apologizing and forgiving are linked. So we'll see what we can get through, because there's a lot. But let's begin with taking refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha, generating our altruistic intention as our motivation for being together. So it's really important, as a spiritual practitioner, that we put what we do within the context of being of benefit to all living beings. And that means we have to stretch ourselves. Okay? Our aim isn't just so that we feel better and we deal with our trauma and our, everything that's happened in our life. As spiritual practitioners, we're doing that work because it needs to be done. But in the larger picture of how can we contribute to society in a proper way, how can we contribute to all living beings, and we see it also as part of our path to full awakening. Yeah, so to really becoming a fully awakened being, a Buddha. So this is quite important, this attitude, this motivation. It's very different than just thinking in our normal way. Okay? So it really, stretch our mind. But that's good, isn't it? Yeah, our mind often, we're like this. And it's this mind that is so narrow, that is focused on me, I, my, mine, all the time. That is the mind that makes us so miserable. That is the mind that's unhealthy. Okay? And yet we're so attached and stuck to that mind, that attitude. So this is why again and again we try and hear about and meditate on, developing equanimity and impartial, open attitude towards everybody, love, the wish for all these sentient beings to have happiness, not just my family and the people I like, wish for all beings to be free of suffering. Again, not just me and the people that I love, but all living beings, whether I like them or not, whether they're nice to me or not. Okay? Everybody. So you see, this is really it. You can hear our minds start to creak as it's like, I really have to open my mind and think about all sentient beings, but what about me? Well, yes, you think about yourself. You are one of all sentient beings. And if you want to help all sentient beings, you have to take care of yourself and so on and educate yourself. But there's a whole wide world out there, and it's not all about us as much as we would like it to be, as much as we think it is. But if it were all about us, we would be 100% miserable. Yeah? So I can think of somebody in our country, I will not mention names, who thinks it's all about him. Yeah? And everything that happened is all about him. But when you look at that person, is he a happy individual? No. Very unhappy, suspicious, judgmental, angry, condescending, yeah, not a happy individual. So, it's actually very freeing and will make our mind happier when we realize, it's about everybody. It's not just about me. Yeah. And to open our hearts to everybody in that way. So let's start. We'll visualize the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, in the space in front. So especially when we think of the holy beings, these are people who have impartial love and compassion for everybody, including us, no matter what horrible things we've done. Yeah. So they are our role models. They're what we want to become like. Yeah. So, we don't want to become a career. We want to become a sane, compassionate human being. Yeah, who can be of benefit. That's what we're trying to do. Okay, so they are our role models, and we turn to them for refuge, for guidance, for support, for teachings, and for nudging, so that they can nudge us when we get stuck. And then we imagine we're surrounded by all sentient beings, and especially the people you hold grudges about, especially the people you can't stand, are in front of you, also facing the holy beings. So you have to see them. And we think we're guiding all of living beings to take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So all these people we don't like, now we imagine their mind has changed. Yeah. They are turning for spiritual guidance to the Buddha and the Bodhisattvas. Yeah. They have the seeds of goodness in them and they want to change. And when we say the recitations, we think that we're leading all of them in doing that and setting them on the path. Okay, so take a moment and do the visualization. So spend a few minutes observing your breath and let the mind settle down. So let's generate our motivation. So whatever problem you have, be it physical illness or injury, or social, not getting along with somebody, or emotional, having anxiety or depression, or mental, not being able to think clearly. These are just some examples. So think of all the other people on this planet who have that same suffering. And not just the people in this country, but think of people in other countries who have that same suffering that you have. And especially think of people in underdeveloped countries who have those problems, who have no access to resources in society, to other people, or whatever they need to help them alleviate the suffering. And reflect at your own extraordinary fortune of having resources to help you deal with these problems. So resources could be, money to go and seek help, or people around you to help, or spiritual practice that helps you. The availability of medical care. And then think, as long as I am suffering with this problem, may it suffice for the suffering of all other people who have this problem. So as long as I'm suffering, may I take on their suffering. May they be free of suffering. And as you take on their suffering, also think of giving them your happiness, giving them what they need. And as you imagine giving what you have, and you can elaborate on it, it doesn't have to be real possessions that you have or things like that you can imagine. And as you give them these things, then their suffering disappears, and they develop all the qualities of an enlightened being and abide in happiness. And then think, with this love and compassion as a motivation, may I become a fully awakened Buddha to be able to best benefit all living beings. So in Buddhism, we talk a lot about dependent arising and conditionality, that all the people and things and situations and everything around us, it all arises due to causes and conditions. Okay? So we know that intellectually, but really thinking about it, yeah, I exist due to causes and conditions. Whatever I'm experiencing in life exists due to causes and conditions. This whole planet, the whole universe exists due to causes and conditions. And the thing about causes and conditions is that nothing remains the same. Everything is transient. Because the causes change momentarily, then the results they bring change in every single split second. So nothing is fixed, nothing is permanent that's gonna, always be the same without changing in any way. Okay, so this is a very important point and an important way of looking at life, because our usual way of looking at life, we concretize everything. Yeah, we think things exist with their own nature from their own side. We think we have a permanent personality. Other people have a permanent personality. When we have a strong emotion, it feels like the emotion is not changing moment to moment. It's always going to be there. It's always going to be the same, whether it's a good emotion or a painful emotion. We think, this is it, everything's fixed. Now, when we have relationships with other people, we think now they're fixed, they're not going to change. Yeah, we think the other people have certain personalities, again, fixed, unchanging. So if we have a problem with that person, they are always going to be the same way, and that problem is always going to exist. They're not changing, I'm not changing, the problem's not changing. Everything is concrete. Okay, this is the perspective of our ordinary mind. But if we just look for a moment and ask ourselves, am I changing or not changing? Am I the same person as I was yesterday? No, I'm not exactly the same person I was yesterday. My body's different. Yeah. What I'm thinking about is different. Lots of things are different. I've had a whole bunch of experiences between yesterday and today, and they've influenced me, and I'm different. Okay. The people I have problems with, do they have a fixed personality where they're always going to respond to things in the same way? Do we have fixed relationships so that my friend is always my friend and my partner is always my partner? And people are predictable because they have permanent personalities, so they never do anything outside of their personality. Yeah, if we just kind of ask ourselves those questions, we'll see everything is changing all the time. I'm changing, other people are changing, relationships are changing, problems are changing, good events are changing, everything is changing. Okay? So this mind that concretizes everything and sees it as, okay, once things are like this, they're always like this. That mind is extremely narrow. It's a wrong conception mind. It's not seeing things accurately. And that mind puts us in prison because we don't allow for ourselves to change and other people to change and the country to change and events and relationships and everything to change. And then when things change, we don't know what to do with it. We freak out. Wait, I thought it was always going to be like this. It can't change. And so sometimes even things that are bad, when they start to change and become good, we get nervous because who am I going to be if I'm not in that person who's a victim in that situation? And I need an identity. I need to be permanent. So let's bring back that painful situation so I know who I am. Okay, this all goes on unconsciously. But just investigate and see if your mind has ever done that. Yeah? And similarly, sometimes when we have very good relationships and then something happens, we go, this can't happen. We're in total denial, this can't happen. They have a fixed personality. I have a fixed personality. The relationship is always supposed to be like this. How could it change? Yeah. Okay, so what we're getting at is something in our outlook to life is misconstrued, is mistaken. And the problem with that is that when there's a conflict between reality and my mistaken notion, who's going to win? Reality always wins. Mistaken notions never win. We can fight on the side of the mistaken notion, but reality is not going to go away. Yeah. So if we apply this to the whole topic of forgiveness, we can begin to see how we sometimes get stuck, making ourselves permanent, the other person permanent, and they did this to me, that situation permanent. They're never going to change. I'm never going to change. I can never forgive them. They did this to me. Never forgive them. I am going to go to my grave hating them. And then you wind up like my mother's side of the family. Is that going to make you happy? That doesn't make us happy. So we have to, open our mind and realize that nothing is fixed. So no matter what somebody did to you in the past, it is not fixed. And Buddhism, it's quite profound when you go into Buddhist psychology, because it really talks about how in situations we think we're perceiving the whole situation, and that it is an objective situation out there. Actually, it's being filtered through all of our assumptions, all of our beliefs, and we're only picking out certain details in the situation because there is so much going on, and our limited minds cannot comprehend that. So we pick out certain things and create the situation in terms of what we pick out. Yeah. So Buddhism really describes that process. And when we start to look inside, it's really amazing to see that, yes, it's true. And that we have certain ways of approaching situations that always color what we experience in the situation. Okay? So our veil that we frame could be, I'm always left out. It could be, I'm neglected. I'm ridiculed. Nobody appreciates me. Nobody believes me. Nobody loves me. Everybody's out to get me. It could be these emotional patterns of what we look for in a situation. And then the whole situation appears to us in that way. Okay? So remember the story that we heard as kids about there's a big elephant and a bunch of blind people, and everybody feels a different part of the elephant. And nobody gets the idea that it's a big elephant who's a sentient being. Some people think it's something fuzzy, that's the tail. Some people think it's something hard and curved, that's the tusks. Somebody thinks that it's heavy, that's the foot. Somebody thinks that it's rough, that's the body. Nobody's perceiving the whole situation. So if you get used to just perceiving the tail or the body or the foot or the tusks or the trunk, then any new situation you come into, you're expecting to see that part and experience that part because that's been your experience before. And so in each situation, we pick out the details that create that and validate that. Okay? So I'm not saying this happens in every situation, but it is a conditioned pattern. Okay? Now, the thing about things that are conditioned, that depend on causes and conditions, is that they change. So no matter what conditioned emotional habits we have, they are not fixed in a fixed personality. They are not things that always have to be there or always are there. They change, and we can help them to change if we want to. If we don't want to, then what to do? But if we want to, we can help recondition our mind so that instead of perceiving certain things, we perceive other things Okay? So, an example that I like to give a lot, and you can apply this very much to forgiving too, is we've all had the experience of going into a room where we don't know anybody. It could be a classroom, it could be your first day at a new job, it could be a party, it could be any kind of event, and there's a bunch of other people and you don't know anybody. Okay, so there's two people who are going to go into this situation. One of them says, uh-oh, I'm going into a situation where I don't know anybody. All these people probably know each other, and so they have something in common. They're going to be talking to each other, and I don't know any of them. I'm going to be the one who's left out. And anyway, it's hard for me to start talking to strangers, so I'm probably just going to stand there and try and look like I know people and like I'm having a good time. But this kind of situation I hate because I can't relate to anybody, and I don't know if I'm going to like these people, and I don't know if these people are going to like me. And I don't even know if we have anything in common if I tried to talk with them. So what's the use? Okay, so that's one person. The other person's going to go in the same room. They also don't know anybody. And they say, wow, I'm going in a room where I don't know anybody. And here's all these people who have had so many different life experiences, who have seen things and done things and experienced things that are beyond what has happened to me. So it's going to be really interesting going in and talking to them and learning about their lives, learning about what they think, learning about what's happening. It's so interesting to learn about other people. Okay, so same situation, two people with totally different outlooks. Can you predict what their experiences are going to be when they go in that room? It's really evident, isn't it? When you go in with a certain attitude, it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, for the person who says, oh, I don't belong, I don't fit in. Yeah, that's how you're going to feel. For the other person who is, and you see that first person, their focus was always on me. Do I fit in? Are they going to like me? Am I going to like them? Will I feel comfortable? Yeah. This other person, the focus isn't on themselves, it's on the other people. Here are all these people I don't know who've had all these experiences. And there may be somebody in that room who is shy, and if I see them, I'm going to go talk to them. So that person has a totally different experience depending on what they're focused on. Huh? Maybe they'll meet each other. Yeah, that would be good. That would be very good. Okay. So my point in all this is let's try to get away from the mind that makes everything concrete and fixed, and think about the flexibility in people, including ourselves, the flexibility in situations, okay? And see the openness and the possibilities instead of clinging on to what has happened before or what we think has happened before. Okay? So, Let's look at some of these questions here. How do you distance yourself from negative people that encourage afflicted states without dipping into anger? Can we forgive someone that we've cut out of our lives without inviting them back? Okay, so there's these negative people that encourage afflicted states. So when my mind gets afflicted, it's their fault. It has nothing to do with me having the seed of afflictions in my mind. It has nothing to do with my buttons. They are the negative people, and they are the ones that cause my afflictions to arise. But I'm not angry at them. Can we see somebody as a negative person like that without some bit of anger? No, there's anger there, isn't there? As soon as we attribute our problems to somebody else, there's anger. Yeah, as soon as there's blame, as soon as there's fault finding, there's going to be anger. Okay? And remember that the definition of anger is it's a mental factor that is based upon exaggerating the negative qualities of someone or something and then wanting to get away or wanting to strike back. So it's based on exaggeration. No, my anger isn't based on exaggeration. They did this, and I feel this because they did that. And until something outside changes, I can't let go of my suffering. Okay, do you see the trick our mind plays on us? Do you see how our wrong views trap us? Let me tell you a story. This is one that His Holiness Dalai Lama tells. This one moves me to my core. So, as you know, in 1959, or maybe you don't know, Tibet was occupied by the Chinese Communist forces. And there was genocide in the country, environmental destruction. His Holiness the Dalai Lama and tens of thousands of Tibetans fled into India and became refugees. Some Tibetans remained behind. Many of the monasteries were destroyed and the nunneries too, and people imprisoned. Yeah, so they may be monks or nuns who have led exemplary lives. They're put in prison. Yeah, and lay people put in prison. It was a mess. I mean, this is what happened with communist China, and then of course going into the Cultural Revolution. And the Chinese suffered under this too. It wasn't just the Tibetans. So His Holiness fled, and sometimes Tibetans would succeed in fleeing and getting out because the communists had closed the border, wouldn't let them out, but then sometimes they could get out or they could get permission or they would just cross on their own. So one monk came out at one time, this was some years after 1959, I don't know exact the date, but His Holiness always welcomed when people were fleeing Tibet. He always welcomed them, and he liked them to come and see him. And they all wanted to come see him because they just have such regard for His Holiness. So this one monk comes to see His Holiness, and His Holiness asks, because this monk was in prison and he was tortured for many years, many years. And His Holiness said, you know, what were you most afraid of during that time when you were imprisoned and tortured? Okay. Now think if that had been you, what would you have said? The thing that was most you were afraid of. Okay, yeah, being killed, being injured, pain. This monk said, what I most feared was that I would lose compassion for the prison guards. Yeah, that's what he most feared, was that he would lose his compassion for the people who were harming him. Yeah. So this is a real spiritual practitioner. Okay. We are probably not there yet. Maybe a few of you are. I'm not. But it's a process that we train our mind and we work through these different things and keep training the mind so that we see things in a more positive way and we don't get stuck in past events. Every time I tell that story and every time I hear His Holiness tell it, to me, it's just amazing. Yeah. But what it shows is that that is possible. This was an ordinary human being who trained his mind like that, and that's possible. Okay, I want to tell you another story. Okay, this one is on here. This is a story that I learned about from one of the people who was our very first supporter when we started the Abbey. Yeah, the woman who was here, who stocked the cupboards, made sure there were towels in the bathroom when we moved in. I didn't even know her at that time. And so she's helped us ever since. And this is a story that she told us a few years ago about her older brother. Okay. So her older brother, he was either a police officer or a sheriff. So I don't know, if he was in a city or a county, but he was in law enforcement. Okay, so we kind of know nowadays a little bit about law enforcement, don't we? This was written about in the newspaper, so I will use the person's name because it's public knowledge. Okay, so Tracy is our friend, Tom is her brother. Okay, so Tom was a cop or a sheriff, and okay, let me start at the beginning of this article. So this is an article that was in the San Quentin News. Okay, the San Quentin prison news, not the town news. Okay, the prison news. So it goes, after seeing and hearing his victim at trial, Jason Samuel knew in his heart that he needed to come clean and be honest, both with himself and everybody else. My crime was so senseless, he said. I felt so sorry for what I did. So what he did was he shot a police officer in the neck in 1997. Now, we all know shooting people, you're in big trouble. Shooting a cop, you're in bigger trouble. Yeah, Trying to kill a cop is even bigger trouble. Okay, so this is what happened to Tom. Yeah. So Samuel was the guy who did it. Okay. So he was a misguided 15-year-old running in the streets of Bakersfield, California. And at age 15, now remember, his whole attitude was conditioned by his upbringing. And for sure, his upbringing was one of family chaos and poverty. Okay? So he made himself a tragic promise. If the police ever tried to arrest him, he vowed, to never go down without a fight. He'd shoot to kill if necessary. He said, my mindset back then was suicidal and homicidal. I didn't care. I felt like I had no purpose in life. If I died a legend, a hero in the hood, I was cool with that. This is the attitude of many young men who grow up in poverty, who grow up in the face of racism. So 2 years later, he fulfilled his personal oath. Chased and cornered by Tom Morgan, the sheriff, after running into a backyard, Jason attacked the officer. Tom went to draw his gun, and Jason shot him with a derringer he had always carried. At his trial, he argued that the gun had discharged accidentally as a result of the physical struggle with the sheriff. He testified that he never intended to shoot Morgan, to shoot Tom. And now he says, I was trying to lie my way out of trouble. Okay. So Tom Morgan, severely injured, barely able to speak, took the witness stand to confront Jason and tell the jury of his version of events. Jason was found guilty for the attempted murder of a police officer. Okay. Christy, Tom's wife, spoke at Jason's sentencing. She wanted to express her pain and outrage at the devastating effects her husband's injury had had on their lives. Okay, Jason's response, that's when I started praying for them. I knew what I did was wrong. Okay. So as the years behind bars went by, Jason said his thoughts never strayed too far from the impact of his crime and the harm he brought to the Morgans and his community. He educated himself, earned a GED, renewed his faith in God, and eventually came to San Quentin to take part in its positive rehabilitative programs, which now the state budget has usually canceled. But Jason credits the restorative justice program with helping him see the big picture. He became involved in the San Quentin utilization of inmate resources and experiences, and became a member and completed the first step of their training. And then he had a parole. Then he had his first parole hearing in January 2016, almost 20 years after his crime. Okay, so usually parole boards, forget it. They give you an opportunity, but they often say, well, your crime was this and that, so we can't put you on parole. So it's kind of a fake thing because what your crime was is never going to change. So they're not looking at how you've changed. They're looking at what the crime was, which will change, and so they usually deny parole. Okay, and this is what I've seen again and again with the inmates that I work with. Okay, so he went to his first parole board hearing, and he said, I knew if I went to the parole board with a bullshit story, I'm never going to get out of prison. Okay, and the thing is, often if you tell the truth to the parole board, they still don't let you out. Anyway, he thought the right thing to do, the only thing to do, was just come from my heart. Okay, so Tom Morgan was there too at the first board, the parole board hearing. And he told the board that Jason should never be let out of prison. So Tom was angry, he was vengeful, he wanted to inflict harm on the guy who shot him in the neck. Okay, so Jason said that's when he just decided to open up, and he told the parole board exactly how he lied at trial, thinking back then that lying would get him out of trouble. And more importantly, he wanted to show them the quality of the man he had now become. The parole board decided he was not suitable for parole. Okay. But Tom Morgan at that parole board hearing noticed Jason's change more than anywhere else. And between that first hearing and Jason's next parole board hearing in 2017, Tom thought a lot about that 17-year-old boy who shot him. 17 years old, versus the honest man who now wanted the parole board to know the truth. Okay. He did not attend Jason's 2017 hearing in person, but instead participated via phone and told the parole board he no longer opposed Jason's release. Okay. The parole board still denied him release, but listening to him speak to the board, Tom decided that they both might benefit from opening a line of communication. So the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation directed Tom to contact the Victim Offender Dialogue, the organization that helps victors and offenders reconcile to enable healing and restorative justice. So I've talked with a number of prisoners who've done this restorative justice program. It is so good. I mean, they go through many trainings beforehand with another inmate guiding them, looking at their crimes and so forth. And then they first meet people who have been the victims of similar crimes, but not their own victims. And they dialogue. Yeah. And then later they can even meet with the victims of their own crimes. Okay. Incredibly, it's an emotionally wrenching experience for both the inmates and the person who was harmed. Okay. So they began writing each other, exchanging letters. So Tom told Jason that he'd already forgiven him for what he did and that he was willing to go visit him and give him as much insight as he could on the whole thing. So they met face to face in prison. And this was Tom initiating the face-to-face contact with Jason, okay? Tom's wife, Christy, did not want anything to do with Jason. She didn't want to go when they met. And she said, for the last 21 years, I have viewed Jason as a monster. He had tried to kill my husband, and I was afraid of him. But Tom and Jason began to build a friendship through their letters. And as that happened, Christy began to rethink her idea of Jason. And at one point, she wrote to him, and he wrote back. So she went with him one time to meet Jason and see him with her own eyes. And Van Jones from CNN also wanted to be there. So Van Jones, I don't know if you've ever seen any of these things, he's great. And he started a project and a website called, I can't remember, but it's something, it's about restorative justice, it's about redemption. I'm sure if you Google Van Jones, you can find it. Okay, so he wanted to be there too, because he wanted to make this story part of a film series about restorative justice and the healing power behind this whole thing, the VOD, which stands for Victor Offender Dialogue. Okay, so here's Jason saying, walking into the San Quentin visiting room to meet Tom, I was nervous and in disbelief. The man I tried to kill 21 years ago was standing right there across from me. The two men, victim and offender, reached out to embrace each other for the first time. All the guilt and shame inside me came flooding out, and I immediately began to sob, Jason said. I couldn't believe how blessed I was to have Tom here to comfort me, to feel all that love from someone you've done harm to. I know that's God at work right there. It has to be. Redemption Project. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so they sat down and talked to each other as friends, and Jason opened up about his life in prison, the rehabilitative hurdles he'd overcome. And at the end of that session, Christy, who was like, no way I'm forgiving this guy, she came up and hugged him. Yeah. So Christy said, I was able to witness a victim-offender dialogue with my husband and Jason. Jason was humble and apologetic. He hugged Tom and cried. This is when I knew he was not a monster, but a changed man. Okay, so they had more victim and offender dialogues together, and the one they had in 2018 focused on the impact of the crime on Christy. And she said, she wrote to them afterwards, thanking them for listening to her part of the story. Yeah. I'm excited about the changes occurring in my life, Christy said. I am so much happier, and for no particular reason. Actually, there's a very good reason why she was happier. She let go of her, her spite and her anger. She said, I am more joyful, optimistic, and carefree. Tom and I have both noticed the difference in me. I have to thank you, Jason, for a lot of my change. Okay. So then they had another victim offender dialogue in February 19, and it was an opportunity to just hang out as friends. Tom and Christy promised to be at Jason's next parole board hearing in person to advocate for his release, and they kept that promise. So the board granted him parole in March of 2019. Okay, so Christy said the 17-year-old boy that went into prison with nothing is coming out of prison ready to be a responsible and productive citizen. Okay, then Tom wrote again in May of 2020, so just a couple of months ago, And he said, Jason lives in Oakland and works in San Francisco. Every day he gets up early to ride the BART to provide care for those too disabled to care for themselves. Not only must Jason face traveling on mass transit during a pandemic, but he must go into and out of one of the most densely populated areas of the state. And in his job, he is providing hands-on personal care for individuals who are both medically vulnerable and at high risk for contracting the COVID-19 virus. Jason is an essential worker who is risking his life every day to care for others. He is one of those care workers we are praising and recognizing for their bravery and sacrifice. And yet there are so many who would have been glad to see him spend the rest of his life in prison. Okay? So Tom and Christy, they weren't Buddhist. They weren't anything special, ordinary people, and especially Tom being a cop, you know. And then look at when we talk about because things are conditioned, they can change. Look at what the change that happened in Tom and Christy, and look at the change that happened in Jason. Yeah. And people got rid of their solid images of who they themselves were in Jason's case, or who the other was in Tom and Christy's case. Okay? So this thing of, stretching the mind and realizing that people are not whatever image we have of them is very, very potent. Okay, so maybe that was an answer to that question. I think there was another question I think that it's an answer to too. And this person asked, what about significant trauma? For example, abuse when a young child or rape. This leaves significant traumatic damage on the mind and can lead to lifelong damage, including PTSD. What's the Buddhist perspective on this? Okay, so I think I just gave it. Okay. Now, I am not pressuring anybody to adopt the Buddhist perspective. And I want to make very clear that Buddhism and therapy are two different disciplines, okay? And one cannot take the place of the other, yeah? So in the case of forgiveness, I am presenting the Buddhist perspective. Some people may really need therapy and benefit much more from the therapeutic perspective, okay? So you have to see where you are and what you need. And maybe a combination of both will help you, okay? So the idea is, that we have to see the perspective that helps us, and realize that there's complementary things going on, yeah? But also realize that these are two different disciplines. So don't expect therapy to fulfill your spiritual needs. And don't expect Buddhism to always solve your psychological difficulties. Yeah? Okay. I think that's important to make very clear here. Okay. So here's another question. And this question is so interesting because it shows how we think. When somebody says or does something that makes you angry, what do you do at that moment so you don't feel you are that anger? Because it can be so intense that you feel it is who you are at that moment. Okay, so that's true. When we get really angry, we feel that that's all we are is anger. Yeah. But let's look at the first sentence that she wrote. When somebody says or does something that makes you angry. Okay? So somebody makes me angry. They're out there, okay? They say something. The sound of their voice is sound waves. Okay? So they're out there. Excuse me, Venerable Kunga, you're going to be that person. So Venerable Kunga says, you're how could I ever trust you again? Okay? And so there are her words coming to me in sound waves, hitting my eardrums. I got my hearing aids in today, sending little blips of electricity up to my brain. Okay, synapses there do something. And my mind says, she is threatening me. She is saying, so I can think either one of two things. She is blaming me for something I did not do, and that is unfair, and I've got to put her in her place and let her know that what she said was totally uncalled for. Okay, because she made me mad. She made me angry. Those sound waves had the virus of anger in them. And when that virus hit my eardrum, I caught the disease of anger that she gave to me. So my anger is her fault, her responsibility. I was just sweet, innocent, charming, cooperative, helpful, me sitting here. I don't do anything wrong to harm others. Maybe once in a while I slip up, but that was a mistake. And now she is making me angry, and it's not fair. So I get mad at her. Or there come the sound waves. And also there come the look on her face, you know? So there's some visual thing too. Yeah, that face, look at that. Yeah, she's making a face at me at the same time she's telling me off. And this time I hear it, and again I get angry. But this time I'm half angry at me and half angry at her because what she said was true. Or maybe it's true. I'm not sure if it's true. It might be true. Or it might not be true. If it's not true, why is she blaming me? Yeah, why is she making me angry, blaming me if it's not true? But if it is true, then I am the most awful, horrible person in this universe. I am so guilty. I am so, what she's saying about I did this and that. Oh, I feel so angry now. I feel so hurt. And this time the anger is at myself, because how could I have ever done that? Okay, so the virus in her on the sound waves got me again. This time the visual ones. Yeah. You need to work harder. You're not doing quite as well. Oh, yeah, that one's good. Okay. Some members of the community are better than others at doing it. Okay. So then I get mad at myself. Yeah. But anyway, it's always her that made me angry. Okay. So let's check that out. Okay. Again, Buddhist psychology. We have some manifest states of mind, like compassion, like anger, that are totally opposite to each other. Sometimes they're manifest and we're experiencing them in our lives right then and there. Other times they are in a seed form. They're latent. Yeah. So that means the potential for anger is there, but at this moment I'm not angry. The potential for compassion is there, but at this moment I'm not compassionate. Okay? So, as long as I have the seed of anger in my mental continuum, there's the possibility of me getting angry, because that potential for the anger is there. So remember all my buttons that are lined up, big red buttons that all say, "Don't push me"? Yeah? But as soon as somebody walks along, just the movement of the air from them walking, sets those buttons off. She's criticizing me. What business does she have criticizing me? Oh, I'm such a horrible person. Whoa, whoa. Yeah? And our mind goes totally under the, influence of anger. As long as I have the seed of anger, that's going to happen. Okay? So it's not that other people are making me angry. We always say they made me angry. Actually, it's more accurate to say, I got angry when they did this. Or the seed of my anger ripened when they did that. Or I made myself angry by conceiving of the situation in a certain way. Oops. I made myself angry by conceiving of the situation in a certain way. Listen, I wasn't conceiving of the situation. I was seeing reality. Because remember, in a situation of conflict, I am right, you are wrong, and the solution is you change. Yeah, and that is cast in stone. Yeah, that is one of the rules of the universe, so don't you ever try and break it and blame me. Because it's always your fault that we have the conflict. It's your fault that I'm angry. It's your fault that I'm upset. It has nothing to do with how I interpret the situation. Nothing to do with me having the seed of anger. Nothing to do with me being super sensitive over different issues. Yeah, nothing to do with me being just a little bit too focused on myself in an unhealthy way. Okay? So that I want to really emphasize here, when these things happen, because some people, especially women, when they say, oh, it is due to my anger, I must have done something wrong, I'm such a horrible person. Yeah. And then, it's not just women. I've met plenty of men who do this. I'm such a horrible person. I made everything go wrong. So do not interpret what I'm saying in terms of how we create situations by the details we pick out and how we think about things. Do not think that I am saying blame yourself every time you get mad. Yeah, I'm not saying you say, oh, I got mad because I have the seed of anger in me. This seed of anger in me is always causing me problems, and something is wrong with me and I can't get rid of it. And always it's my fault because I'm a defective person. That's not what I'm saying. If you want to do that trip, it's a free world. Go right ahead. But that's not what I'm saying. Okay? And blaming yourself for everything that happens in the world is not going to solve any problems, because blaming yourself is not the same as taking responsibility for what was your part in the situation. Those are two different things. Okay? What's the difference? Taking responsibility is based on being able to see the situation more accurately and seeing things that I may have done intentionally or unintentionally that maybe the other person misinterpreted, or that pushed the other person's buttons, or maybe I was intentionally trying to get my revenge and harm them, and I have to own that if I had that motivation. Okay, so owning things, and okay, if I did that, I'm responsible for my negative emotion, and I have to work to change that negative emotion, because I don't want to go through life being spiteful and vengeful. Okay, that's very different than blaming ourselves because somebody else is mad. Blaming ourselves, we go into guilt. We go into what is wrong with me. I am such an awful person. Look what I did. Nobody else could botch the situation up as much as I botched it up. Something is inherently wrong with me. I'm like King Midas, but it's not turning to gold. Everything I touch turns to a catastrophe. Okay. That is self-blame and guilt. What word did you see all through that? I. I am so bad. I am helpless. I am hopeless. I can't do anything right. Yeah. Maybe that's a little bit too self-preoccupied. Yeah. That guilty mind says, I can make everything go wrong. That's how powerful I am. I can make everything go wrong. Excuse me, you are not so powerful that you can make everything go wrong. Yeah. So I'm contradicting what you believe about yourself. You are not so powerful that you can make everything go wrong. Yeah. Own what's your responsibility, fix it, and drop everything else. Okay, let me add one more piece then. Because self-forgiveness, yeah? If you're falling into that self-blame, guilt, catastrophe thing, you need to be kind to yourself. You need to have a more realistic view of who you are. So I'm not talking about whitewashing it and papering things over. We accept our responsibility, but yeah, we realize, hey, I'm a human being. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. Yeah, I made a mistake. Or in this situation, I didn't make a mistake. This person is really misperceiving everything that happened. And I need to go to them and explain to them things so that, they can calm down a bit and, see that, because they're projecting that I wanted to hurt them. And that wasn't what was going on, So I need to explain to them. But none of this is cause for self-hatred, okay? And for the times when it was my responsibility, and, maybe I had a rotten motivation. I was greedy. I was self-concerned. I didn't care about the effect of my actions on anybody else. Yeah, then I have to acknowledge that. And then in Buddhism, we have the 4-point purification practice, which I will describe this afternoon. And that is one way to help us alleviate, this and forgive ourselves. Yeah, because self-forgiveness is very, very important. Yeah, it's more important than other people forgiving us. Yeah, other people forgiving us helps them. So of course we want to help them. But actually, I don't need them to forgive me. I need to forgive myself for what I've done. So this is where the 4-point purification practice comes in. So come back at 2:00 for the next exciting adventure of working with the mind.